The governor has called a special session, which is by law, he has to have a specific purpose. And the governor's special session proclamation says that it's for the purpose of considering legislation new or pending, which addresses a balanced budget and structural reforms, including but not limited to property tax relief, job creation, workers' compensation reform, government consolidation, education, term limits, pension reform, and spending limitations. The way that relates to the Illinois Senate is that we've done all those things already. We did them prior to the May 31st deadline. We passed a balanced budget, Senate Bill 6, which utilizes his spending amount to the penny, cuts $3 billion out of the budget, and has a tax increase that he called for that is no higher than 4.95. We passed a property tax relief, two property tax relief bills, both for municipalities as well as school districts for 2 years. Obviously, by passing a balanced budget, we're helping create jobs. That's been the problem for the last 2.5 years by not having a balanced budget. We passed a workers' compensation bill that's on his desk, including one that creates a insurance company, in effect, that's sponsored by the state that'll help bring rates down. We passed a government consolidation bill, Senate Bill 3. It'd be a good idea if the governor had a bill signing ceremony on that. I think that would be nice. Education, major, phenomenal, really, that we got to pass Senate Bill 1, a comprehensive overhaul of the worst-in-the-nation school funding plan. That, of course, will be sent to him as soon as he says he's going to sign it. The Senate passed term limits for leaders and advanced a constitutional amendment to have it apply for the House as well. The pension reform, Senate Bill 16, a classic example of a product of years of work and a combination of support from Republicans and Democrats. And of course, the spending limits are included in the budget that we passed. So everything that the special session would do, we have done in the Senate. And we're waiting for the House to act on them, or the governor to sign them, or mandatorily veto them, and then have us come back and we would act on any changes that he made. So, but I know from experience the most effective way to actually get stuff done is to have legislative leader meetings, go back to your caucus, and negotiate. The special sessions are things that we haven't had, I don't believe, for 10 years, when Blagojevich was here. And they were, I think, unfortunately designed to be a political stunt, to give the governor cover and deflect from his efforts to really not work on reaching an agreement. Now, today, I was planning on coming down here to have a meeting with the 4 legislative leaders. The governor has not called a leaders meeting of the 5 of us since December 6th, so I thought it would be helpful if we met with the 4 legislative leaders. But the governor pulled the plug on that, told the Republicans not to go. So I don't think he's very serious about actually getting stuff done. Again, the Senate stands ready to act on any changes that the House makes or the governor makes. I'm ready to meet with the governor and the other legislative leaders. He has said that only he can call those meetings, so that's fine, but the 4 of us could meet. I think it might be productive, as a matter of fact. So I would urge the governor to get serious about a compromise, and at a minimum, don't prevent your Republican leaders from joining those negotiations. So the framework is there. We've already passed it. The legislative vehicles are there. This could all be over if the will is there. And I hope that the governor would come to realize that and get to work. Thank you. Happy to answer any questions.
What about the will of Speaker Madigan? Do leaders' meetings?
He was ready to go.
Well, I mean, but
And I went there and,
leaders' meetings aside, what about actual taking up, substantive matters concerning the budget, taxes, reforms in the House? If you guys have already acted, where's the House at?
yeah, the action is in the House. That's what I said. And you probably know now that after May 31st, that the Speaker couldn't do anything on his own. He really needs Jim Durkin and the support of the Republicans in the House. That's where the key is. Because to my knowledge, the Republicans haven't voted for a budget in 15 years, the last 15 years. So that would be a major first. So I think the pressure is really on those Republicans in the House, and I think that they want to get this done as well.
How do you know it was the governor that pulled the leaders off?
You should check with the Republican leaders and ask them why they didn't show.
Was the governor invited to that meeting?
No, of course not. I'm not allowed to call, the governor's made it clear, he's the only one that calls the leaders' meetings. He is the governor, he calls the leaders' meetings of the 4 legislative leaders. I asked for a meeting he asked for a meeting of the 4 legislative leaders and himself. He's made it clear, if you go back and check, that's his role. I asked for a meeting of the 4 leaders, and they all agreed initially, and then the 2 Republican leaders indicated that they.
Why was the governor not invited to that meeting?
For the same reason that the governor hasn't invited me to a meeting since December 6th. Okay? Now, if you think that I should call 5 leaders' meetings, I think the governor would object to that. He wouldn't even let the 4 of us meet, much less call a meeting of the 5. Oh, my God, how do I respond to that? I really don't know how to respond to that. I could, Mary Ann, you're absolutely right. I could have yes, maybe he was mad that he wasn't invited, and that's why he asked the other 4 not to go. We'll try it, seriously.
You met this morning with Speaker Madigan?
Yes.
What were your discussions about, and was there any progress?
Well, we're on the same page in that we want to pass a balanced budget, and I've pointed out the pieces of legislation that we have passed that are pending over in the House, and had discussions about how those can advance, and but we really wanted to have the other 2 Republican leaders there.
And at what point, in your opinion, do Republican leaders say, with all due respect, Governor, we do need to sit and meet, this is how we get stuff done, and we're going to go anyway?
I would hope so.
So would you, if the role was reversed, would you be inclined to go against a Democratic governor and meet?
We had meetings all the time without Governor Quinn.
And some would argue that didn't help the state any either.
What's that?
Some would argue that by not including
We passed the capital bill, we passed balanced budgets for 6 straight years.
and taxes were quite high too.
Yeah, and paid off pension debts and pension obligation bonds, and paid down our bills to $3.5 billion.
The governor is included. It's the 4 tops and the governor.
I think you're mad that you're down here.
It's not.
President Cullerton, what's the purpose of the leaders' meetings? Because we already know where the Republicans.
Because we are experienced, we know how to compromise, all 4 of us. We've worked together. We had great success in putting the capital bill together with Tom Cross and Leader Radonio. We know how to compromise. I think the problem in this equation is the governor. I think I've been pretty clear about that, right? We owed $3.5 billion 2.5 years ago before he got here. So now we owe $15 billion, and it's not going well. So I've talked about all the bills that we've passed, balanced budgets, his spending. It's never enough. He moves the goalposts, all those reasons. So maybe the 4. I've also said, I've gone around to all of you guys recently, said it's time for an intervention by the Republicans in the House. They can do this. You know this, right? Procedurally, you need the same number of votes to pass the bill as you did override a governor's veto. So we could all just do this without the governor. But we need the Republicans in the House and some Republicans in the Senate as well.
Have you made that specific request of Leader Durkin, and so what was the response, or how are you trying to get Republican pressure for intervention?
Well, he agreed to come to a meeting today initially. We were going to talk about it.
I know you've talked about this in the past, but the effect of TV ads running, and I know there's internet and everything else now too, but the governor's running ads, Pritzker's running ads, how do those things affect the process? Should they be happening now, or how do you?
Well, no, I've made it,
as part of the-
look at, the concept that I was down here in May, getting my caucus, working with Republicans to get a balanced budget and reforms passed. And it's not easy to do that, to get people to vote for a tax, as you can imagine. And he, instead of working down here, was cutting campaign ads for the third straight year in a row. And then after we passed those, after the deadline, he then calls special sessions and refuses to allow his own Republican leaders to go to a meeting. That's kind of amazing.
Mr. President, say to you that he would pull the rug out from under his own leader?
I'm sorry, first part?
What does that say to you?
I'm very disappointed. I urge him not to do that anymore. Call a leaders meeting. I'll show up anytime.
What does that say to you about his intentions or his end goals in all of this?
I am questioning them. I have no idea what his plan is.
Have you spoken with him this week?
No, I haven't. It's been a couple weeks, I think.
Do you try calling him? Or
I've called him in the past. I've talked at great length about some of these issues.
But not this week.
Not recently, no.
Well, Mr. President, you're proud of Senate Bill 1, but just a day or two ago, it's all running together. Senator Barrickman was at that very lectern saying that it was big fat phony and he alleged chicanery and tomfoolery, and his bill's a lot better.
Yeah. I don't agree with Senator Berkman on that. The governor told me he'd sign Senate Bill 1 if we could get an agreement on everything else.
Well,
When did
but
you say that?
The Friday before the last day of May.
so before the Chicago bailout poison pill amendment was added to
Yeah.
it, that now
Well, the governor said through his education secretary that he's in favor of 90% of the bill. That's why he was going to veto it. I think he's in favor of 100% of the bill. He just, I've said this before, he's just using the Chicago part of the bill. He's claiming that it's a bailout, which it isn't. And he's trying to hold that part hostage to try to get Rahm Emanuel to somehow be motivated to somehow put pressure on us to reach some kind of an agreement. That's the only thing I can think. So the bill itself, and I'm glad you raised it because it's a really amazing bill that we can fix this worst funding formula in the nation, eliminates special deals. And so there's one funding formula for the whole state for all new money, and every school district's to keep what they got this last year. It eliminates, for example, the Chicago block grant that people have said is a special deal. It also eliminates the special deal that all the school districts have in the rest of the state, where they get their normal cost paid for and Chicago doesn't. So it levels the playing field, and it's really a great accomplishment. And so I disagree with Senator Barrickman. And all of the groups, the reform groups, all in favor of the bill.
President Cullerton, given, I know you've talked about what the Senate has done, but given that clearly Republicans aren't fully on board with that, are you giving any attention, or should there be any attention given to the quote-unquote capital compromise in the House, or should that just be dead and based off of the grand bargain? And can you speak specifically to the notion of a temporary tax increase, given Illinois' experience with that?
Okay,
if
this is
passed?
really important. The Republicans in the Senate didn't even introduce a balanced budget for the special session for us to consider. They do not have a funding bill. They couldn't find a sponsor to introduce the income tax bill that they claim they want to pass. So we can't even vote on it. It's not even a balanced budget. As far as the bills that they filed over in the House should take them up in special session.
What about the notion of a temporary tax increase?
I think it's a bad idea. I passed a temporary tax increase. I was the sponsor. And look what happened. It went down. The governor in the veto session, that veto session said, don't raise it. I'll give you a balanced budget. That was 2.5 years ago, and he hasn't done it since.
You said that the House should take up the bills that were introduced. Did you communicate that to the Speaker?
No, I think he knows what the special session's about. They're having hearings. They're having testimony on workers' comp and on property tax freezes.
What did you think of the Monday, or Tuesday night address from the Old State Capitol? The unity address.
Yeah. Well, again, that's why I'm here. I'm glad the governor wants to work on a balanced budget.
Should he rescind any of these special session days? I mean, he's called all of them through June 30th.
I think that it's not positive. What you should have instead is what I suggested, leaders' meetings. And then you communicate with your caucus about what these compromises might be, and you see if you can get the votes for it, and you work together in that way. That's how you're effective.
Senator
But
Brady
without
said
him.
that-
Just want to make that clear.
No, the leaders' meeting should be with the governor and the 4 legislative leaders. If you don't call one since December 6th, then maybe you could let your Republican leaders go to one just with the legislators. That's what my point is.
The last leaders meeting, he described Speaker Madigan as being basically the opposite of a productive member of the meeting. He said that that's why the governor isn't.
Who said this? I'm sorry, I missed
Senator Brady described, I mean, obviously he wasn't there, but it seemed to be his takeaway that Madigan had poor conduct in the last leaders meeting with the governor back in December, and that's why it hasn't been called, because it was, he said that was the opposite.
The governor said that he didn't think we were serious about a budget. That's why he said he didn't want to have any more leaders' meetings. So what did we do in the Senate? We passed his budget. And what did he do? He had his members vote no.
What do you think he wants out of this session?
Well, he keeps on changing the rules, right? He keeps on asking for more. So I want to reemphasize the property tax freeze, big deal, right? He had Senator Radonio introduce that bill 2 years ago, in June of 2015. 2-year property tax freeze, and we passed it. And now it's supposed to be a 4-year property tax freeze and some other kind of stuff that's really almost radical, I think, that he wants to add. These are these new bills that he's filed over in the House.
What do you think is radical about them?
From what I understand, the idea of property tax reductions through referendum jeopardize bonds in the bond market, and there could be a dramatic increase in borrowing cost of local governments. Because you've sold bonds, your bondholders think they're going to get paid off with future property tax increases, and now through this new process, they could be dramatically reduced or eliminated. How do you assure those bond purchasers that they're going to get repaid? And with that uncertainty, that raises interest rates. So that's just one thing that I heard in this newly introduced bill from a couple days ago.
The Radonio 2-year.
Something that's not well thought out and brand new and changing the goalposts. Where was that bill back in January?
So based on your observations about where things are not going, for the folks at home who are looking down there and wondering, what are the people in Springfield doing?
Yeah.
And willing to get done, what do you say?
You know what's really frustrating is when we tell them we passed the budget, and they don't know that because it hasn't been reported. We passed a balanced budget with a partial reinstatement of the old tax. And we took, amazingly, his introduced budget, then he introduced on February 15th, and passed it to the penny. And then we also passed his indicated need for revenue using the exact rate that he asked for. And that's what we're supposed to do. And that bill is sitting over there in the House, and now we need a 3/5 vote. We need Republicans to support it. And then, so that's what I tell people. The Senate Democrats, by the way, I just had a caucus. Since they went home, people are saying, what did you guys do down there? They're real happy to tell them what they did. We're very proud of what we did.
So what is your hope for, if you were saying you've done your part, what is your hope?
I'm hope that the House would pass what we passed. If they want to modify it, we'll come back and we'll probably agree, since it needs a bipartisan vote in the House. Everything that the governor called the special session for is over in the House. Everything there needs a 3/5 vote, meaning Republicans have to vote for it, and a lot of Democrats have to vote for it, and anything they pass, we will most likely agree with. So that's why I'm emphasizing the action is in the House. We want to work with them, but the action is in the House.
So just to be very clear,
President Cullerton, there hasn't been a whole lot of action in the House other than the committee of the whole. What is your opinion of that process?
I'm not in the House. and I can't sign bills, I'm not the governor. We can only do what we can in our own caucus, and we were very successful in our, and not just our caucus, but in the Senate, working with Republicans the whole session. Yes, ma'am.
But to be very clear, just so I understand, Senate Bill 6 is what we're talking about. That's the budget that you passed?
Senate Bill 6, one is the spending bill and the other is a
That's the
revenue.
budget that you're referring to.
Yeah, it's two bills. It's real important. One spends, one raises the revenue.
What are the two, 6 and?
Nine.
Okay, so you passed this, you said it's what the governor wanted, it's what he introduced, are you talking about the governor?
Yes, this is important. The governor introduced his budget required by law on February 15th. He had an actual spending number, $37,312,000,000. We passed a spending bill in May that had that exact same number. We agreed with the governor on the spending amounts, and then the governor, when he introduced his budget, had a kind of a strange way of saying he needs $4.6 billion. He literally said, working with senators on grand bargain, $4.6 billion. That is represented by 4.95% income tax increase. So we passed the governor's budget for him.
But you said that he didn't let Republicans vote for it.
They didn't vote for it in the Senate, even though we worked with them. I think there were 14 meetings to get to that product.
But why? Why did he not? Why? Was it
Because he
his
wanted some
turnaround?
other reforms, that's
Like
correct.
his turnaround?
Like everything that we already passed,
Okay.
which, like everything we already passed. So this is one really good benefit of the special session that you guys are down here so I can explain that again.
No, I
President
appreciate that.
Cullerton, the Republicans are saying the workers' comp bill's watered down, creating a state-funded workers' comp company is gonna not solve any of the problems of fleeing manufacturers. So it seems the GOP has said, we're gonna sign on to tax increases and Senate Bill 9 and amend it however they wanna do with the 4-year, parity to the property tax freeze. But they wanna see substantive, meaningful workers' comp reforms and also leader term limits. You guys passed that in the Senate. Where's it at in the House? So is that where the compromise is, to sign off on tax increases in exchange for
Yep.
meaningful reform?
So let's take them one at a time. The workers' comp spent a year and a half working on trying to get reforms for workers' comp. Kwame Arul was the leader. They had 3 different Republican leaders that were assigned to the topic, made major offers and major concessions in that. But we had a tough time passing it because the unions and were opposed to it and trial lawyers. So, but the Republicans never signed off on the bill and never offered to vote for it. So we didn't have enough votes to pass it, even though we made the offer. We probably would have saved over $120 million. So we did pass, though, a bill that the House had passed over with some of those reforms that we could, the ones we could pass with Democrat-only votes. We didn't have Republicans willing to vote for it. That was the problem with that bill. What was the other issue that you thought that, term limits, we passed term limits for immediately, the first day of session, we passed term limits for leaders in the Illinois Senate, and a constitutional amendment. Senator Bordoni is a sponsor. We've read it 3 times. It's ready to be called, to be sent over there, although most, as you know, constitutional amendments aren't really don't go on the ballot until late next year.
But again, do you think that the urgency you said before is on the House? What is Speaker Madigan telling you in as much as why he's not moving forward with any of this or amending anything that you guys sent over?
Your focus has been on Speaker Madigan. I think what you're missing is he can't do anything by himself anymore.
But the Republicans have said, we will vote for tax increases if we
Well,
get meaningful.
then go ask Leader Durkin how he's doing with his negotiations with the Speaker. We're done. We're over on that issue. We've already offered the olive branch to the Republicans. They already said, no, we don't want it. Find out what's going on in the House. Ask them.
I read in Snead today that Democrats keep coming up to the governor, he told her, and telling him to stay the course, you're doing the right thing, and his wife tells him she hasn't seen him this happy in 20 years, and he's honored and humbled because he's able to help the people of Illinois with their future. What do you think of that?
I'm glad he's happy. But he shouldn't be. This is really an embarrassment. It's an embarrassment. We owe $15 billion. We've been downgraded. People are not being paid. People are not being served. There's people who are not getting breast cancer screenings because of this. We laugh about, comments like that, but it's just sad. It's totally avoidable. That's why I've been working with the Republicans this session in a bipartisan fashion, and I give credit to those Republicans who did all the work with us, just weren't allowed to vote yes because of him.